trying to jump on the debate panel of PrimeCayes here. We'll see how this goes. It is full right now, but we're going to go into the waiting room. What voice channel am I in? Let's see here. I got to shut this off. Let's see. Close. Here we go. Let's see.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Hey, do we have webcams?
I do.
Okay, just want to test your webcams out before going on.
Yep. There we go.
Perfect. All right, give me 1 second. I'll throw you in.
All right.
Just follow TOS guidelines. No out of place words. We'll say that, okay?
Yeah, for sure.
No problem. Give me 1 moment.
Okay.
So maybe no bail
maybe
for,
I missed some.
for
I
violent repeat
I missed some of
offenders.
it. I apologize. Could you try it again?
Okay. So intuitionally, I agree. That sounds like it makes sense. However, our jails are going to be very, 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 very full of people, more than they already are. So I think the idea behind bail is hold on, Prime. Stop. Okay. The idea is really, really violent people who are likely to reoffend and hurt other people on the way out. They shouldn't get bail. But if you can deter them skipping on bail before their court date, so they don't have to be awarded the state in the meantime, that probably makes pragmatic sense.
I'm so confused.
What? No.
This
is a terrible idea. This is a terrible idea.
What do you mean it's a terrible idea? This is how bail works.
Yeah, I know, and I think bail as it works is bad. This is why I'm trying to reform it.
I would say bail for violent crime out of the question. I don't think that should happen.
You have to define violent crime.
That's I guess another thing.
Crime where you hurt someone else,
like a bar
in
fight.
some way. Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that all violent crime necessarily would violent crime.
If someone,
really?
If someone hasn't been indicted yet, like if someone hasn't been like proven guilty yet, how many days are they allowed to spend in jail?
Well, I mean, you almost certainly aren't going to get out on bail within the first 2 days of going to jail. You almost certainly are not going to get out that soon because it has to go
to
trial, right?
I worked in a prison for 3
really?
years.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
It depends, right?
Okay, well, what's your perspective then?
My perspective on this is we need to stop putting people probably in jail and in prison for many things that they could just be issued a ticket and a court date for. We stop bogging down the jail system, and we stop bogging down our federal prisons, our state and federal prison systems, and that we would no longer need to create a system where we need for-profit prisons to put everybody in jail that we want to convict.
What about repeat violent offenders, repeat sexual offenders?
Repeat violent offenders, because here's the thing, right? I don't think there should be any such thing as a repeat sexual offender. Maybe an extreme take. But it's like if your sexual offense is enough to have you put on a registry where you're going to have to register where you live and where you go for the rest of your life, and you're going to be given the opportunity to screw that up at some point in the future, you should probably just be committed to a system. I don't want to dox myself here, but I live in a state where violent sexual offenders have almost zero chance of seeing the light of day ever again because of the way that we process and hold them long term.
Sounds awesome. Sounds like I want that to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of.
But the issue with this is that we've tried to create systems like this in places. I believe it was California, where they literally tried to create a compound, almost its own like little micro city, where they could put like sexual offenders, even like less violent ones, and keep them there. And it just wouldn't work because people who hate sex offenders, rightfully so. I'm not going to argue with you if you don't like sex offenders, especially like child predators and stuff like that, or people who are very predatory, in general. literally drove out of their way into the desert in California and destroyed their infrastructure. So they had to come up with something else to do for them. So it's just going to require a lot of like getting people to understand.
Those people committed a crime.
Yeah, well, yeah, they
Destroying
did.
Infrastructure.
But I mean, you guys are probably familiar. You probably heard the tropes in movies and TV where like how sex offenders get treated in prison. So they're almost always segregated. But it's just like that on the outside. Like tons of people go out of their way to make the lives of sex offenders miserable. When in reality, adding anxiety to these individuals, and I'm trying to advocate for them because, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan. But adding anxiety to these people's lives only makes them more likely to do something out of desperation or reoffend, just in general. So
even if you hate them, this aggression towards them is unproductive.
Yeah. In my state, we actually have, if somebody has been deemed predatory, it actually requires, even after they've served their prison sentence, they go to a forensic mental institution, basically, and they are held there until a judge signs an affidavit for the release. And
This
what
all
happens,
sounds very reasonable.
Yeah,
Do you
Where's Mr.
object to
Girl?
this?
This sounds like Mr. Girl's argument.
and I mean, what happens when a judge has to sign your affidavit to get you released from where you're being held safely and away from the general population? Your affidavit never gets signed, so you never get released.
Well, the thing about prisons in general is that most offenders, no matter whether they're violent or not, do reoffend. I mean, it's because of the way that our prison systems are set up.
It destroys their life.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, even people. So I've seen prison. I can see the possibility for prison destroying people's lives in less severe situations, and I've seen it happen to people that it shouldn't have. People who were going into prison with very minor things. You guys know what a 120 shock is?
Nope.
It's prison lingo. Okay, so basically, I don't know how many states practice this. My state practices it. It's basically a 4-month prison sentence on the back of normally what will become a 1-year probation sentence afterwards. And so you're sent to prison for 4 months. You spend the entire 4 months in the worst prison in the entire state or your sector, normally, which is a diagnostic center, because you never get processed past the point where you can go to a long-term holding facility. So you end up in this place in a 120 shock. You're mixed in with everyone. So you go to the most short-term housing in the most short-term prison, which is often, populated by everyone. So like you could be a guy who's on a 120 shock for, having like his second DWI. They just want to give you something to, really shock you. That's the whole point of the name. But you could literally be on the top bunk in your cell, and the guy underneath you could be like a quadruple murderer. It could be anyone. And you put these people in these really harmful, anxiety-inducing situations, and they learn things that they'll never unlearn. And prison. You want to make someone a convict, you send them to prison. You want to make someone reformed, you find another solution.
Yeah, right. They either assimilate to the situation that they're in, or they completely separate themselves from the situation. Which is, if any of you have ever been in a situation where you've been in prison, it's hard to separate yourself from the general population. You have to kind of group up with people in order to survive, especially in some of the more violent situations. It's violent prisons.
Have you been to prison?
Yeah, I have.
Why do you
Cool.
care?
Yeah. What'd you do?
It was.
I got somebody here to corroborate me.
It was for drug charges.
Shit.
Yeah. It was a long time ago. I'm in my 40s. It was when I was in my mid 20s. So
They must have been pretty fun drugs if you went to jail. Like you went to no joke prison.
Yeah, well, it was based on hallucinogenics, and there were
shit.
yeah.
So they were probably really harsh back then.
Yeah, it was really harsh charges back then. So they're a little more lenient around the country today, but in some areas that is. But yeah, so basically what it is you kind of have to hook yourself into those situations. Now, I guess I was someone who was introspective enough to pull myself out of that and to go in a different direction. But many of the people that I know, and then friends I made in prison and friends that I was with outside of prison, they didn't have that opportunity. They kept getting back into these worse and worse situations, and it did basically ruin their lives just because they were introduced to the prison system instead of an environment where they could have been rehabilitated in a more positive manner.
Better.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: what percentage of the prison population just has no hope of being rehabilitated? Like, these guys are not getting better no matter what you do.
I think in the system that we have today, it's a larger number than it would be if we took non-violent criminals out of the equation and put them in a situation where they could more easily be rehabilitated in a more positive environment, you know?
No, I know the nonviolent. I'm talking about the violent.
Okay.
So
We don't have a reformation system.
Also,
in
like,
place.
yeah, but like 50% of inmates, I think, are what's it called? Antisocial personality disorder, right? Not to say that those people can't be reformed, but the people that tend to end up in prison are much more often people with ASPD, right?
Yeah, and like I said, we don't have a system for reformation. Like, it's just not in place. We don't have jobs. Well, I don't know how it is. Some states are better than others. Like I said, I live in the U.S., so things can vary very wildly. 500 miles. So,
especially when it comes to for-profit prisons, their commodity is
they have no motive.
keeping
They have no
people
motive
in there, you know.
Yeah.
So
I think, like, okay, so in Norway there's that Anders Breivik guy, and because of how Norway punishes murderers, I think he's gonna get out like kind of soon. He's the mass shooter. Do you guys know who I'm talking about?
mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure what they do is they put him up for a retrial at the end. Like, it's not like he gets out; he has to like go to a.
Really?
Wait, was that the one that was the bow and arrow shooter?
He had a PlayStation 2. He served his time.
No, he's the guy who went to the camp for kids and just like slaughtered them like 50 kids.
I got
I
100.
remember, yeah.
Yeah, great guy.
But these people never get out though, unless they are what's the word? Unless they experience a psychotic break and like a panel of super depth PhDs decide like this is never going to happen again. Like, I don't know if you ever heard about. Sorry.
I think it was a dog.
Okay. Oh, my bad. Sounds a lot like many of you. So no, I'm just kidding. There was a beheading that happened in Canada. I don't know if you guys ever heard about it. It was a few years ago. A guy that had a schizophrenic break on the bus, on the Greyhound.
On the bus, yeah.
Greyhound
cut off the
beheading,
guy's head. Yeah, so
Yep.
that guy had schizophrenia, right? I don't remember which schizophrenia exactly, but he was recently released, right? And
Oh my
as
God.
far as we're aware, the odds of his recidivism are like insanely low. We'll probably never hear from him again. I mean, maybe this doesn't age well, but that seems to be the case broadly, is that like people that have psychotic breaks had the psychotic break because they weren't properly supervised or medicated. And if we let them out, it's because we're sure that it's not going to happen again.
That's like a one-off.
What's
Yeah,
your
and that was in a different country. Here, they'll just, whether you're schizophrenic or not, they'll just stick you in Gen Pop and give you fucking medicine. You know, it doesn't. It doesn't fix the problem.
your
So
life's over.
I think that there would be. I think that we should definitely look at that. Use particularism and look at that in every situation, especially when it comes to mental health, and make sure that we're not sticking people in there that are only going to get worse or have their mental issues exacerbated by being in a situation like that.
Yeah. Exactly an area where America should be like other countries. And I'm not here to talk shit America. I think America's awesome, but that's one of those areas.
Yep.
What's your best prison story?
Mine?
You really want it?
He's got some, man. He's got some.
I've got some good stuff.
Quiz was an inmate, but so
are you gonna do that? Oh, never mind.
Am I saying your name right? Kismet was
yeah.
an inmate. I'd like to hear both of your stories.
Well, I mean, nothing really crazy happened. I mean, I heard the stories I heard were worse than anything that really happened to me. I was in for 4 months, so it's not like I was there for years and years or something like that. I was on probation longer than I was in, which is probably that what you were talking about, that 120 shock. I didn't hear that term, but I was on probation for a year, and I was there for about it was 6 months, but I got out in 4. So
yeah.
I did hear a lot of people talking about like what they were going to do when they got out, and just hearing some of the things, like, it's almost a defeatist attitude in a lot of ways that people were talking as if they didn't have any other choice but to go back to their guy and get more shit, and like there was lots of talk about guns and other crimes that weren't reported necessarily, or they didn't get caught with, things like that. I think the worst thing that happened, I got in a fight one time, and it got stopped before it happened, but it was with a white supremacist dude, and he didn't like the fact that I was talking to some other people in the ward. So that's basically what happened.
You were even fighting racism in corrections. That's crazy.
I don't want to
You're
make
a
it
real
about this
SJW.
conversation, but if you guys really want to hear the story, I've got a couple of good ones, but I know which one I'm going to tell. But I'm going to
the Vaseline one.
Go ahead.
No, that was actually the forensic mental institution. That was when I was
Oh,
there.
okay, okay,
That's a
okay.
different story.
All right,
So it's Christmas night. So skeleton crew, if you know the term. I was working in SEG, and we
What is that seg? What is that?
segregation. It's ADSEG. It's you guys probably know it from TV as solitary confinement. In most cases in prison, it's never solitary. You almost always have a cellmate. You almost always have a cellmate. They almost always pair you with somebody who matches with you in terms of like your demographic and the things you'd probably be okay being celled up with. So it's nothing like you see on TV, unless you're in a maximum security prison and you're a special case. But so we have a guy. He's all the way up at the top row, far into the hallway, and we see smoke coming out of his room.
Uh-oh.
So he has used, I don't know what exactly he used to start the fire. I don't remember if I figured this out. But what had actually happened is he had broken his toilet and lit his bunk on fire. So there was smoke coming out of the top while his room was filling up with water. So as I'm walking down to his room, he rips the towel out from underneath his door and water starts flying down the walkway. So there's smoke coming out of the top and water pouring out of the bottom. We get this dude out of his cell and get him in this cage we have at the bottom so we can clean this stuff up and find him a new room. And he breaks the bottom of the cage out and crawls on top of it, like vertically. Like he crawls. It's weird. It's hard to describe. Like he crawls upside down for a portion of this. I don't want to get too into this because I really don't want to make fun of people because this guy was very mentally ill. But I want to tell the story. I don't want to make it sound good. But like I said, I really don't want to get into making this guy sound super bad because he had some serious problems. But all in all, it ended up him on top of the cage, butt naked, and getting hit twice with less lethal shotgun rounds before he would stop.
Ooh.
Like he was psychotic.
He was hanging upside down in a cage.
Oh, at one point, but then he broke out the door and then crawled up on top of it and had to be shot twice with less lethal 12 gauge shotgun shot
Damn.
before it would come down.
Like, don't those things like, I don't know, hurt like a lot?
Yeah, they do. And he was skinny, very skinny guy. Yeah, he
Sheesh.
was not in a good place.
Better than 9 mil though. Much better than 9 mil.
They can kill you. That's why it's called less lethal, not non-lethal.
Mhm.
It's.
And those fucking things hurt, man. I've been shot with them a couple of times. That was in protest, though, not in the hospital or in any sort of prison or anything like that. So
it's way more fun, I'm sure, to get shot with them when you're not in prison.
Yeah, you can run farther. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
So I just posted in VC chat an article about the police killings in Los Angeles because we were talking about that earlier. And this is in Los Angeles County. About 43 people get killed per year by police, and so the number of non-lethal shootings is presumably 2 to 3 times higher than that. But
still much lower than 300.
That's got to be
right.
So 12 every day.
So like once a week was approximately on the right order of lethal shootings, and then the non-lethal shootings are obviously going to be higher.
Does that seem excessive?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
What's the population of Los Angeles?
It's impossible to know.
Is it
Wait,
that,
is that for LA
excessive,
City
though?
or LA?
It's
County?
LA County. 40 average of 43 per year since the year 2000.
Okay.
And it's only the lethal shootings.
Yeah. What if all of y'all are based in Red Pill and I love y'all? I gotta go. Thank you, Prime.
Excessive. So you said 43 per year lethal shootings by police, right?
In Los Angeles County, yes, that's
in
right.
Los Angeles County.
It's only excessive if the violence is uncalled for. That's the whole question.
Yeah, I mean, that is really the question.
Well, there's a question of de-escalation too, right? Like, was it
avoidable?
Yeah.
It's not a question of de-escalation. It's a question of how pervasive violence is in your culture to begin with. That's where all that comes from.
What do you mean?
Okay, but that's not necessarily. I mean, violence could be. The police uses violence correctly sometimes. So to say the police have X number of shootings doesn't tell you the full picture because they could be using violence 100% correctly in 100% of cases. Probably not.
They are.
But you have to have the context to make that judgment call.
Aren't there recordings of when the shootings happened when the other person wasn't armed? I mean, I think that they do have statistics like that, right?
Well, even that one's hard though, right? Because like concealed weapons are going to be a thing, right? Like there's lots of cases, not proportionally, but lots of cases where officers don't use lethal discretion, and then they end up getting themselves killed because someone reaches into their pocket when they couldn't have presumed whether or not it was for a cell phone or a gun, right?
Yeah, but I mean, how does that make it any better, though? I mean, seriously, like, if it's going to be a situation like that, they should just train those police better to recognize when somebody's reaching for something that's going to be lethal towards them.
I mean, there's no way.
It's easier said than done.
sounds
That is
impractical.
easier said than done. Yeah, how are you going to do that?
That's why I say de-escalation, right? Is it's like make sure that motherfucker does not reach into his fucking pocket, right? Like and don't say it like I did, because that's how the cops say it right now, right? Use the right words in the right way to the right people from the right person, right? That's what
I mean, they could use things like tasers as well, too, right? I mean, that would be the first option I would think of if I was, I don't want to kill anybody, so why not use something that's going to incapacitate them first?
Yeah, I mean,
not actively armed.
Taser's not always a available option.
Tasers suck if the person is on drugs, essentially, is the brass tacks of it, because sometimes they don't go down and then they kill you.
Or if they're wearing thick clothing where the probes can't get through, or if they're
out of range,
or if they're behind something like a fence where
or
bullets
tasers have a higher failure rate than guns in general.
Yeah. Which is why I'm more in favor of like I was saying, the percussive rifles that get used in Canada sometimes. Like I've seen them used in person.
Yeah, just don't give them guns.
Well, I'm cool.
Like
I'm cool with them having. I'm cool with them having guns too, but it should be a last resort, right? Like, and to be honest, percussive rifles, non-lethal percussive rifles, percussive rifles are really intimidating. Like they look like fucking assault weapons, and they aren't. They look actually like sci-fi assault weapons. So people get fucking scared and they don't move. In the two times that I've seen them used,
if you have a little safe in your vehicle and you have to like unlock the safe to get to your gun, sure.
No.
Police. I do not want
need
a
guns.
killing weapon.
Very often, police are ambushed. Very often, police are ambushed and shot in the face with guns, and they need a gun on them to save their partner or themselves. I've seen countless videos of that, like that, where they knock on the door, they're being totally kind, and then somebody just opens the door with a gun and shoots one of them in the face. I've seen that happen on video.
How many videos of this have you seen? Of
many.
I've seen at least 5 of similar circumstances.
Shot directly. There's a channel called Active Self-Protection, and
I don't know how relevant this is because you can't disarm the police into an armed population. Period. Like it just can't happen.
Not right away.
Totally disarm them.
There's groundwork.
I definitely agree with that.
If you want to see crazy videos of cops getting into just straight up gunfights with psychopaths, go to Police Activity on YouTube.
If you
want for your mental health,
if you want a surefire way to militarize the police, it's disarm them first, because the amount of blood that will come from blue blood that will occur. Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I'm
let's
obviously
try
not.
it and find out, because
they will think about it, right?
We're just conjecturing.
I mean, I'm a leftist,
this is all conjecture.
Do you not think
that
if there's an armed population with a non-armed police, like completely unarmed police, that maybe they might start challenging the police?
Yeah.
Do I think that they would?
Dr. K. Just Dr. K.
Okay. Sorry. Come on.
Well, here's the thing: is the police is still going to be carrying something dangerous on them and have the full backing of the state behind them.
But if people know, if people know, okay, this man can't do anything to me. I've got a 9mm in my fucking pocket, buddy. Like,
can he?
Come on.
No. Again,
the people who are most likely to do something like shoot at a cop are not the people who are great at planning ahead. So
people who shoot at cops,
if you're counting on someone to do like the mental calculus of what the cop has, blah blah blah, really all it comes down to is he's weaker than me. I have a gun. I can leverage this strength to get away.
That sounds like whether armed or disarmed, someone's going to already be doing that. If they're
because there's situations where, oh fuck, that cop has a gun. I better not do anything stupid. Or I don't know.
Shot. It sounds like you're applying too much logic to people who want to do violence.
I mean, if you can reach to make the claim that all murders are done out of necessity or duress or whatever, I feel like this is a very small leap to assume of the human psyche. That
Yeah,
like if you
they're
know
either
that
done of desperation or passion. Those are the two
desperation
roots
and
of
passion, there you
basically
go.
all crimes.
But if you're going to make a jump to make that sweeping psychological claim, I think it's not much of a leap to like not having credulity at the idea that if you know that police officers aren't armed with deadly force, that if you're armed with deadly force, you don't have to be that fucking scared of them.
Okay, but we have a lot of unarmed security guards that work in private security, and we don't really have an epidemic of those people
Remember
being
how
shot
all
all
the
the time.
security guards
Oh,
that
yeah,
you
of course,
tremble in your boots? All the
No,
mall
but
cops.
are they getting shot all the
Well,
time?
the thing
here's
though
the
is
thing.
security
They're
guards
not called
aren't
to active.
right. Yeah, they're not called to active scenes like that all of the time. It's not a
Security
situation.
guards
They're not
are not
protecting the public. They're not protecting
security.
the public. They're protecting
Yeah.
private
Correct.
property in a
Mhm.
situation.
No, I know,
where
but
they
I'm
can
just
back down.
saying I'm just saying the mere fact that they are not armed with lethal force is not sufficient reason to convince me that people will go around to start killing them.
I don't think people
Well,
would
we're
just
not
go around
saying
start
that-
killing them.
Hell,
But here's
Yeah,
the
we're
thing,
not talking
police-
about people just mass murdering cops.
Yeah.
We're talking about police showing up to scenes and then dying because they don't
when
have
the
the
police
leverage.
when the
I mean,
police
there's gotta
show
be
up
some
when the
situations
police
where
show
that's
up
true, yeah.
anywhere to anyone, they are a problem because they have the power to put you in a car and put you in a cage forever. When you have that realization dawn on an irrational person who's fine using violence and they are desperate, there's shit in the car that's going to send them up the river. Shut up. There's shit in the car that's going to send them up the river. They are desperate in that situation. The cop has to press to enforce the law. So in a way that a security guard is not pressed to do anything to any perpetrator. Security guard just stands around. I think even contractually they say you can't even touch anybody. Just stand there and look official. That's like
Let's
what
even
a
take a
security
step
guard
down.
does.
Let's even take a step down. Let's go from security guard to bouncer, right? I mean, a bouncer's job is very specific. You stand at the front of a place where only a certain number of people or a certain type of people are allowed in, and you tell them who's allowed to come in, who's not, and if there's a problem inside, you make them leave, okay? And so typically what the bouncer is actually armed with is a very physically imposing appearance, right? Like if you've seen most bouncers, most of them are pretty big people, and they make their presence known, right? Like they look very official, they're dressed for the job, and they tell you what you're going to do in a situation. But if somebody walks up to the front of a club and pulls the gun out on a bouncer who's standing there alone, the bouncer's all he's got to do is move out of the way, you know. But if a police officer shows up to a domestic dispute, they have a job to do, and if the guy inside the house or girl, I'm not going to discriminate here, is armed,
Sure.
they can't do their job if they're outgunned.
That's why the security guard thing is totally non-analogous.
Then for your,
But it was an argument against
scale
them
it
being
down.
like,
We'll scale it down then. If you're responding to a situation that might be violent, sure.
Yeah, that's
have
the
a
answer.
gun in your car,
Okay,
but like,
here's the
if
thing.
you're
Here's the
just-
tricky thing about policing. Every situation,
No.
especially if you're talking about domestic disputes or like property crime or
I've
anything like
seen
that.
cops
Shut up.
substitute teachers bring guns to the
Every crime has the potential to turn. I mean, cops have been killed during traffic violation stops. Okay, so every situation has the potential to become violent. So if you're okay with cops being armed in situations where something could become violent, then you're okay with armed cops.
Couldn't you say
no,
that
but
about
every
anybody
situation
that
in life
you're
could become violent.
Yeah, every situation. That's what I was going to say. Every
ever.
situation in life could be that way. Like you could walk up to a stranger and to ask for directions, and he could, blast you in the head because he's schizophrenic. So you
Okay,
can't...
but the missing part here is that the cop's obligation to uphold the law. So if a cop pulls someone over on a traffic stop, even unbeknownst to the cop, the guy has a warrant or something, and that guy thinks, I'm not going back to jail. I don't care what the fuck happens, which happens in this country.
All the time.
The cop
only to people with antisocial personality
The
disorder.
cop just enforcing what he thinks is a simple traffic violation is all of a sudden in a violent situation because of his obligation to uphold the law in a way that any random person isn't obligated to press any given situation like what you're talking about.
Isn't that still true whether they're armed or not?
Put down his license plate and get him later with backup.
You just have to assume total omnipotence on the part of the police, and that's just is not going to happen. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, his example is that you don't know if the person is armed, right? Because we can't, every single traffic violation, we can't write down their name and then bring a SWAT team, basically, right?
Right.
No, but I mean, I think that they could do some further training with police to notice things like micro expressions and body language and things of that nature. I don't think that there's enough focus on that. Also, it seems that the color of skin, for example, can automatically trigger some police in certain areas. Like I've been in situations where I was in the car, and I know this is anecdotal, but you can see it played out in statistics as well. That like typically when people see a black driver, they're more scared to approach them or think that they're automatically going to think that they're more of a danger. So that happens quite a bit. And profiling is something that these police are taught within the academies and in their training as well. So it's not just something.
Yeah, racial profiling is very effective.
Yeah, well, but it's wrong. It's wrong. It's
hold
morally
on.
wrong.
I think there's room for profiling, just not precisely on the basis of race. Like you were saying, Kismet. Like we do know that police are more likely to stop and more likely to engage in violent interactions with people of color, right? So like there's the nighttime stop occurrences, right? Like when police officers can't see the color of the person's skin in a vehicle when they're making stops, black people get stopped less. It's like open and shut, right? Mm-hmm. And so race is not the best indicator of criminality, but there are lots of other elements of a person's attire, appearance, whatever, that can be good indicators for profiling, right? Like the FBI does profiling to stop serial killers.
Well, and like I said, not only that, but like body language, watching for micro expressions.
Yeah. I'm including that,
psychology of the situation. You can tell. I mean, I know when there's been times where there's been a couple of times where like my license was expired, or I had a couple of drinks and I was driving, and I'm like, oh shit, and you know, you can kind of tell that somebody's a little bit more nervous in a situation, but you've got to be able to discern when that's a nervous towards like, oh, they're panicking to the point where they're going to grab a gun, or they're just a little nervous because they're being stopped by the police, right?
I don't think what you're suggesting is actually possible.
It is possible. It's already possible.
I don't think there's any amount of micro expression training that would make someone comfortable not having a gun.
I'm not saying not have a gun. I'm just saying when to pull it or not.
I thought that's what you were saying.
No.
I mean,
I don't
it's
think
way simpler. It's way simpler than understanding microaggressions. As somebody who's worked, I wasn't a street cop, okay? Like I said, I did work in a prison as a corrections officer. It's way simpler than going so far as training somebody to understand microaggressions. Just be a fucking person, okay? Mm-hmm. Stop being like an autonomous robot and say, hey, you all right, man? What's going on? It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't really happen enough. Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect way to say it. It doesn't happen enough, and I know a lot of people, probably pretty much everybody here, you know, I'm looking around the room, has had an interaction with a police officer at some point in their life. A lot of the time, like I said, they are just like RoboCop. They're just like straight to the point. I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm not paying any fucking attention to you. Here's your ticket or not. It depends on how I feel later. But there are a lot of times, you know, I've had, you know, multiple interactions with police as a part of my career and just, you know, other types of things. And sometimes, you know, you do run into the one who's been around long enough and you get those kinds of things and it's super effective, but it's not something they're trained on. So you never see it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think a lot of like the solutioning for this comes around to just like basic training stuff, like the foundation. So like stuff like de-escalation training, and just making sure that like they're educated in how to use their firearms and when to use them. So I just feel like it's more basic than we're giving it credit for in terms of like how far we're going with this. So in terms of like behavioral training, it's more about how do you like he was just saying, like how do you deal with a human being on the other end that has a problem, or even a human being who's being violent? Like how can you talk to them to try to get them to stop being violent as opposed to shooting first, or training them to make sure that they know that apprehending does not mean you need to shoot someone. So if someone's, for example, with the guy who was like running away recently from like the guy who was like drunk at a Taco Bell, who was like running away after a fight with the officer. If someone's like running away and they're not armed and they're running away from you, shooting them I don't think is a good response. So
you're not supposed to.
Yeah, you're not supposed to.
Shot?
Yeah. Sorry.
Did this Taco Bell guy get shot?
Yeah.
Oh,
and then some of the bullets also hit nearby cars, which is another issue that someone mentioned with the whole thing with the 14-year-old girl in a dressing room. So like there's a lot of moments where they shouldn't be using guns because like of their like not being necessary, but also like the public safety. It's like, should you be using guns or should you be trying to clear the area first? Like what's the priority here? I think there's a lot of things
depends.
that needs to be put into consideration beyond just that one thing. But also, like, it is granted with the fact that these incidents are sometimes rare. So like, it's one of those things where it's like, do a lot of incidents not get reported, or are these incidents rare? And that's the part where it's very ambiguous.
Yeah, and I mean, we also know that police departments that invite, so any police department can invite the Department of Justice to come in and do internal audits and help them to, what's the word, to basically make their praxis better, right? And pretty much every department that it allows for more interaction with the Department of Justice experiences like unilaterally better results. So it's like, it seems to me that it's like, it is obvious that police reform is possible, that complete dispensing with the entire institution is not really necessary, but it like almost comes down to a thing of states' rights. Like the fact that all of these police departments get to just decide more or less whatever they want is a huge fucking problem. And I'm a fan of states' rights, and I'm saying that like it's just not tenable anymore.
And people who are conservative on legal matters should value the concept of checks and balances in government. So therefore, they should like the idea of having external accountability for any institution.
By the way, the "don't tread on me" guys don't like cops.
Yeah,
true.
You're right.
They do when
Not
it helps their
supposed to.
rhetoric. You know, that's the thing. You know, they're like,
I don't know.
Well,
I think it depends on who you've been talking to.
It's even with the January 6th stuff. They're all like, you know, I saw a lot of guys in the audience that were like
diverse,
hitting cops while they were wearing a thin blue line shirts, you know, and it's like, what the, where's the disconnect there? You know, it's cognitive dissonance right there.
Yeah,
I guess my point is, people, you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who just likes authority for its own sake. Who just like, I like police. Well, no, that's not what actually anybody likes or dislikes.
Yeah. Honestly, it seems to me that the main reason people defend the cops is because they hate fucking greasy liberals or whatever.
Well, on that point, we can all agree, right?
Prime? Greasy liberals? You hate them? Prime?
I do hate liberals. They're fucking disgusting.
Well, Prime doesn't defend the police.
Yeah.
What do you consider yourself?
A greasy liberal.
Me?
Yeah.
A slimy leftist.
Yeah, I'm a degenerate leftist. That's
yeah, pretty much.
What's the difference between a leftist and a liberal?
I'm a communist, plain and simple.
Rhetoric and simping for people who take corporate handouts, basically.
No. It's distribution of authority, right? It's how far you're willing to use authority.
So by the way, when people are opposing the messaging of ACAB, do we really believe that the reason people oppose that messaging is because they hate liberals?
Unironically, I think that's a large portion of it, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just, I think most people who oppose it are just doing it counterculturally. They're just literally doing it to counter the point that the other side's trying to make.
It's literally like, these fucking goddamn liberals, they're trying to attack our police, our fucking military, and my president. You know,
I can see people similar to me from a similar part of the world to me and further south from where I am, who have similar ideals to me and actually don't really like the police that much, kind of similarly to me. Literally just saying they hate ACAB for that reason, because they'd rather say they hate ACAB than agree with anything that anyone on the left has to say.
And it's based.
So if it's true that it's ineffective messaging, but it's only ineffective messaging because the people who receive it are put off by it for a dumb reason, then I don't know, maybe you should direct some of that criticism to the people who aren't receiving it in good faith rather than the people who are. I mean, there's room for both. There's room for criticism of the message too, but
the problem is is they're too stupid. Like, to be frank, like a lot of these people are just too dumb.
The only
kind of sneering is really
everybody's dumb.
No.
Is really
so
disgusting.
Look, I say this as a conservative. I don't care about your moral pontification, man. It's the reality. The statistics are extremely present, right? Conservatives, especially of the more extreme sort of fundamentalist religious bent, are substantially lower in IQ, and those are the people that I'm talking about that will take principled positions.
We're talking about IQ.
I'm not saying all of them. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
What do you mean?
You believe in IQ?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Fuck off.
Well, what you don't believe in IQ, or do you deny science?
I don't know.
Why?
Because it's a bunk measurement.
But it's the single most validated metric in all of psychology.
I think IQ is fine as long as it's coupled with EQ, like emotional quotient as well.
Well, we can't measure EQ is the problem.
That's a pop psych thing. It's not even scientific.
Yeah, no, but hold on. This is actually really important because denying IQ is literal, like blatant science denial. Like there's tons of neurodevelopmental markers that play into IQ. IQ is the single most predictive variable that we can isolate.
Intelligence is too much of a spectrum and covers too many different areas to accurately be surmised by a single number on a number line.
So then why is intelligence such a...
I thought that, I could be incorrect, but I thought that IQ was more specific in the way that it deals with the ability to problem solve. Now, I could be incorrect on that.
And so only a specific component of problem solving.
So not really. It's not about problem solving. It's a measurement of your mind's like speed at which it's processing, unless you have some kind of outlying variable that prevents you from properly taking an IQ test, in which case we can't measure your IQ anyway.
I don't really have a problem with IQ like as much as I have a problem with using it as propaganda to against
look down your nose at other people like you just did.
So no, I'm not looking down my nose, right? So you can make all of these, like I said, moral grandstanding pontifications. Like I said, I'm kind of a conservative myself, and my family are some of the people that I'm talking about, and I love them dearly. Like the fact that you need to what would I say? Demean people as lesser if they have a lower IQ is kind of more your business. I don't think that you're lesser if you have lower IQ. It just means that you are going to be less open to experience from a trait psychological perspective.
So let me get this straight. You're saying that they're objectively dumber, but that's actually not an insulting thing to say.
No.
It's actually projection on my part to think that would be a negative character.
Lower in intelligence, lower in G. Yeah.
I think Nick specified.
Are you going to answer my question?
Which a person processes. I think that was the metric that was isolated in this case. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not necessarily to say that someone is not capable. When you say dumber, I think that you're implying that they would be incapable of reaching the same conclusions. But I think Nick is suggesting it would take a longer explanation, or it would take more time and more examples.
Yes.
Not that they wouldn't be able to understand.
You're not going to see.
It's not a case of won't. Sorry, it's not a case of can't, but it is a case of won't, right? And so in an ideal world where we have perfect messaging and are able to reach.
Patronizing. It's unbelievable.
Okay, bro, like I said, I'm a conservative. It's just the reality. Conservatives on average have lower IQ, which means you're going to be lower in trait openness to experience. It's just the reality, man. And it gets even lower. There's nothing ableist about it.
People is just physically less capable of doing X thing.
No, less likely. Less likely. Different than capable.
I think blind people would be less capable of walking straight.
Yeah, I mean it's like if you want to believe in psychology,
actually, don't even think that's true.
You have to believe in IQ. It's just literally. Well, then you don't believe in psychology, mate.
Short people are less capable of doing
why would you believe in psychology when nothing else in the entire field is anywhere nearly as well?
It's a test that only measures intelligence upon a line spectrum of one, like a dotted line. There's too broad of a spectrum of human intelligence and creativity to be measured on a fucking line.
This might be a tautological misunderstanding here, right? So when I say IQ, when I'm talking about intelligence in a technical sense, right? I'm talking about G, generalized intelligence, which is a very specific technical term, right? When I say intelligent, I'm not talking about like the common parlance definition of intelligence, which, like you're saying, includes EQ, which is unfortunately something that we can't measure, that it includes technical ability, understanding, knowledge, blah, blah, blah. These things are not captured in IQ. It's not possible. It's not measured in G. It's not possible, right? But when we measure G, we see personality ramifications. One of the most common ones is that people with higher IQ are more open to experience, which is a trait of personality. People more open to experience are more likely to be willing to engage in these discussions that we're having and have their minds changed more easily. It's just science. What do you want?
I'm sorry, I got it.
Hold on.
Just now.
Even if that's true.
Sorry, you're both talking. I need one of you at a time.
even if that's true, that doesn't necessarily make you more or less intelligent just because you're.
So, like I said, I'm not talking about intelligence from like a colloquial perspective. I'm talking about G. Yeah. Which is
but even this definition of G, that doesn't matter.
I don't think you necessarily
like trade
even
openness
need to
is an independent.
Disagree with what he's saying to disagree with the assertion.
Do you have
Because you
data?
can make the case that the
do you have-
emotional intelligence would be more important?
Do you have the data
You don't
on
necessarily
conservatives
need
being
to
less
disagree in
intelligent
order
than?
to say that that's incorrect?
Do you have the data on conservatives being less intelligent than?
Sure. Let's see if I can find some.
Liberals.
I've seen it before.
So the reason we were on this in the first place was as a response to the idea that we should reach out to conservatives about the way that they receive the messaging. And
No, hold on.
but
Not quite. Very close. It wasn't. Should we reach out though? It was.
No, but it was about
Okay,
the question of whether and how we should, right? And
Wait, it was about.
Okay,
go ahead.
I mean, so I'm going to take like a slightly uncharitable reading of that, but it really sounds like you're saying we need to dumb down the messaging because conservatives are too dumb to. That's almost what it sounds
or
like.
just have more responsible messaging. Like ACAB is one of the least responsible messages you could use to try to communicate a critique of police to the general population. Like saying all cops are bastards is going to alienate. Police officers make up like 1% of the total population, like just active duty. That's not talking about their families, the people that are associated with that profession. It's demeaning, right?
Yeah, it is not a carefully calculated marketing message.
No, I think the nuance is completely lost on it. At first, I kind of agreed with it, but then I realized, people aren't going to get that they're talking about that if you're a police officer and you're on the force, you're almost like indefinitely complicit with the stuff that's going on because they can't really report it without being ousted themselves. And so it adds to a culture of situations where all of them are kind of bastards because they can't speak out without being ousted from the police force or whatnot. And so there's some nuance in that all cops are bastards or all cops are bad or however you want to say it situation, but the nuance is completely lost when you just say ACAB.
So the thing
Okay,
is,
who was asking for it? It was Iram, right? It was Iram looking for the study. There you go. There you go.
Okay, and so the thing is it's not necessarily that you need to dumb down the message. He's not saying that they are literally dumber and like whatever, like the classical sense you might be thinking of. It's that as a result of being, like the colloquial sense, as a result of being less willing, less open to experience, and less willing to change your mind based upon discourse and conversation, the message has to be more appealing than "we hate you, you fucking suck."
Yeah, literally, my perspective. Let me just hit one thing here. So my point was, essentially Cricket was saying that we should put more onus on conservatives for having essentially bad views. That fair?
Okay,
so bad
that's close. Close enough.
Okay, just clarify for me then. That's cool. I don't want to. I want to make sure that I don't it doesn't come back to bite me.
Okay, yeah. So we've been talking a lot about the ineffectiveness of the messaging of ACAB, which I can agree has some merit to it. But the thing is, I'm saying that we're directing all of that discourse at the people who are delivering the message, when in fact a part of the reason the messaging is ineffective is because of how it's received, not just because of how it's spoken.
Because they have also because they have a stupid reason, right? That reason we talked about was because they hate liberals and they don't want to believe anything that hoity-toity university liberals.
That is part of the reason.
So I'm not saying all. I'm saying part. Yeah. So that's what we just talked about, and literally all of us agreed with that to a degree.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And so here's the thing.
Echo chamber is like incredible. Like, how can you say that they just hate liberals and that's like
no, we're not saying.
We're not saying that.
We're saying that part of the reason why there's a lot of hesitance there's a lot of hesitance to criticism of the police, and a reason why a lot of people are opposed to criticism of the police is not because they themselves like the police, but because they do not like the messenger bringing the criticism.
Yeah, and people are very tribalistic. They want to take sides.
Could the reason be that it's framed as like
That's part of
being,
it.
like
Yes.
a
Yeah,
culture?
a million
war?
percent.
Absolutely.
Like,
We've
like,
had
no,
this
I-
conversation.
It is like clearly a culture war.
Everyone has agreed.
Yes. Yeah, we all agree with that. You've missed a lot of the conversation. That's fair. That's
All right.
part of it. We're also saying that part of it is this other thing. And me and
Right,
Jacobus
right.
are saying that as conservatives. I'm just making sure that Base Knight understands so he doesn't interrupt me again. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I'm saying if it's ineffective messaging, that is partly because of what you're saying, because it is spoken in an off-putting way, and it is partly because of the way people are less willing to engage with the message because of how tribal they are and taking sides.
Yes.
And so,
Yeah. And so essentially, they have this silly
Okay.
reason for why they're resistant. Okay, so we've all agreed on that. Part of the reason why they're resistant.
And by the
is
way,
silly.
this is a silly reason that we're all guilty of. Like every
Right,
human
right.
being is tribal and likely to take sides and
Yes.
stuff. So I don't
Yes.
want to say this as if I'm like directing this specifically
Yeah,
at
but there's
conservatives. Like this is an instance of
Yes.
conservatives doing it, but it's something that we all sometimes do.
Yeah. And so my point with this whole thing was, I hear what you're saying. The reality of the fact is, if we want to meet people where they need to be met, we actually do have to meet conservatives on some issues on a lower bar, unfortunately, because they have lower G, which means they will be less likely to take things that we have to say seriously, and will need more caveating, more quantifying, and more essentially just more fucking legwork, right? And this is something that liberals, lefties, left-wing people get upset over all the time. Why do I have to do all this legwork to convince these people? I don't fucking want to. Why? This is
Trust
why.
me, I
Okay,
bust my
Jonathan.
ass.
I know. I
Don't worry
believe you.
about
I'm not gonna say shit to you about like you're not doing anything. You said you do like grassroots activism. That's amazing. But the reality
of
is,
it.
there has to be extra work and extra onus on the left wing than there is on the right wing,
Yeah.
because the left
I
wing
do think
has higher
that
G. The right wing, on
a
average,
lot of people
has
are dumb
lower
because
G,
they refuse to
especially
admit
when you
when
get
they're
into
wrong.
these extra
But
populations like
it's
fundamentalist,
not always the
evangelical
case.
Christians.
I think it shows
Well,
a
more
bit
to
of
the point,
strength
there's a cultural gap that
to
makes
show
Saying
or
they're
to admit
less
when you're wrong.
intelligent, by the way, you can just say that like they're
But it's
less
also
open to
really a
change and
strength
having
to
their
show that
views
you have
challenged.
conviction as well.
But it's
there's
so
also
there's a
the-
balancing
not
act
just
there.
the openness to experience. G is an index of many factors, one of which one of which openness to experience is a factor. The reality is, when you're dealing with people with lower G than you need to do more legwork in any given conversation when it's negotiation is involved, when changing of someone's mind is involved. This is not me talking, right? This is the science. These are experts like Jonathan Haidt, who does massive
Well, thank
research
you for
on the
saying I'm
subject.
scientifically smart. Like it's wonderful.
You're welcome.
But
Well, it's
still-
the truth, though. It's the
I wouldn't
reality.
say that. I really think
adjust
it's
your
going to
messaging.
It's
You adjust your
I'm still going to
messaging.
innately be extremely
You adjust your.
I really think it's how people interact with each other, you know. If you can figure out a way to interact with people in a way so that you can kind of meet them in the middle, or a lot of good ways is a Socratic method where you ask questions and so you lead them to your point or lead them to a middle ground. It is very, very possible. It's just people don't take the time to learn how to use rhetoric and language in a proper way in order to get their point across or to lead somebody to their point of view.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is do you adjust your messaging based on other groups who tend to not do so hot on IQ tests?
I don't really talk with other groups. I don't know what we're referring to exactly here. Like the people I usually have to convince of things are my conservative family members. Those are the people that I talk to. I'm not sure what other groups we're talking about.
Well,
I don't know if we're getting. Sorry.
One of the problems with IQ tests is the way that they're set up, right? This is why we have people saying, "Oh, black people have lower IQ scores."
Oh, we're in
Conservatives
the
have
danger
lower
zone.
IQ scores. Like it has to do with
what's
like
up,
how
Brad?
we ask the questions, right? If we assume that a bunch of rural like population is generally conservative, like we could probably frame the IQ questions in like a context that is.
I
Like,
need to
that
stop you
their
because you're
brains are
completely
more
misinformed
willing
on
to
this.
engage
You
with.
don't know anything about the subject, I'm afraid. So there are multiple well-validated IQ tests where we get the metrics from. It's like the WACE is one of the best IQ tests, right? And no valid IQ test can be taken without a proctor there, someone who's there to decipher the information to make sure that you're actually properly equipped to be taking the IQ test, so that we're getting a valid score, making sure that you're not depressed, you're not going to have test anxiety, developing any kind of like comorbidities or malignancies while you're taking it. What a lot of people understand intelligence to be, what a lot of people understand IQ tests to be, they're just wrong. They don't understand. So that like if the questions are being asked wrong, it's basically not an IQ test.
Okay, but that's
I
setting
think
a ridiculous standard. Like, how are they going to make sure that you're not having test anxiety while you're
Because
having
there's
an IQ
governing
test?
bodies that train individuals for years to administer IQ tests. That's why we have
okay. I feel like
psychometrists.
okay. I think
and
like Nick,
psychologists.
I
It's
think you
lagging
need to,
how? Is
I think
it
you need to
the
give in like a
video's
little
choppy
bit of
or?
just like sometimes shit can go wrong. Maybe
Oh,
maybe
I'm
there's
not
like
saying that.
maybe there's like a
but
variation about how valid it can be. I think everyone's trying to say like it's not 100%, maybe like 98,
It can be
95%,
administered. It can be
whatever
administered to
you
your
want to say it
response.
is.
Never 100%.
I don't think that's actually the criticism that anybody's levying. I completely agree that there can be situations where an IQ test is administered
Try
wrong,
something here.
but there's not a situation
See
where
if that
IQ
helps.
tests are massively flawed and have no predictive value, because we just don't see that in the data. We don't see that in the numbers. It's science to
Yeah,
not
but it's one thing to
suggest
say they
anything else.
have predictive value. It's a different thing to just equate it outright with intelligence.
Well, so what do you mean by equate it with intelligence? I'm talking about G or IQ, like these things.
Well,
that are
right. But we're
issue is
mixing
that
these
a lot
terms
of
with each other a lot.
Yeah, so I caveated it later on in the conversation. When I talk about intelligence, I'm talking about
Did that help
G,
at all?
not the colloquial definition of intelligence that we, especially in white culture, put a lot of like emphasis on and make it a big portion of like your value as a person, which I don't personally do.
Right,
What
but,
is
but if
G?
you
You
say
keep
like
saying
when I
it
talk
with-
about intelligence, I'm talking about G, and then you go on to say conservatives have lower G, then you're basically just calling them dumb, right? And like,
Well, so I'll give you an example here, right? So
What is
trades
G?
guys,
Wait, can you just define what G is before you keep
generalized
going? What is it?
intelligence. Generalized intelligence. It's called G in the research. Yeah. So I'll give you an example, right? Trades guys, not the highest IQ, but I wouldn't say that they're just fucking stupid, that they're idiots, that they're not useful. They're extremely adept at the things they do. They have a lot of kind of like practical common sense. If you've ever worked or hung out with trades guys, they're extremely capable in a lot of ways. But if you put them in a university, they're not going to do great, because the rate at which their brains are set up, not just genetically, there's a bunch of factors into IQ. They're not going to perform as well as probably most of the people on this panel, most of the people that commit themselves to being chronically online, because they have developed into a different sort of person that has a different.
Hey Nick.
Yeah, go for it.
We
Man.
gotta
Sure.
drop your study in the VC chat if you can.
I do just want to make
the one about
So-
conservatives.
I don't know how much of that could be due to sorry, what is it? Is it population bias? Is it I'm not sure exactly what the term is that I'm grasping for. But typically the people who are taking these G tests, the IQ tests, wouldn't those typically be students and graduate students who are specifically chosen to take these tests? So wouldn't the data be fairly skewed towards a more, I mean,
Yes. So if you just looked at
liberal
IQ tests,
perspective?
if you looked at IQ tests just like blank, but like
Right,
it's
just
a
because
super
of who is being tested.
yeah. But so
how
everyone
do we know that that's necessarily an accurate depiction?
because
just
the
based
army.
on-
Oh, sorry. I keep thinking you're done. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. That was essentially it.
Oh, because basically the army of people that study IQ that don't talk about their beliefs or their research very much, because race realists have destroyed the faith for IQ online, have done all of the statistical breakdowns controlling for all of these variables, right? That's basically why they control for the variables.
So suppose we just engage with your premise. We just say that like we're talking to a group of people who have lower IQ on average. Then how would you then tailor your messaging to that group, assuming that's true?
So okay, sorry, one sec. So I'm supposed to put my study in VC chat under Yonko territory. Is that correct?
Yeah, VC chat.
Okay. There's one. Is that the Science Direct? Yes. And then there's another one. There you go. Okay, so the second one's a lot easier. It's right there in the abstract. Conservatism and cognitive ability are negatively correlated. The evidence is based on blah, 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 1,252, blah, 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 go on. That's me reading. What was I supposed to answer to? I think.
Okay, the question was like, suppose that we just like 100% fully accept your premise that we're talking to a group of people who on average have lower IQ. Then what kind of messaging do you think is more effective to people based on your premise?
So I don't know that I can prescribe what messaging specifically is the best. My approach is more, I think it's important to be sensitive to this difference, right? Because you're on it. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a guess then. So are you saying that if it's easier and more effective to appeal to a liberal audience with effective rhetoric, and much of an appeal to the logos of an argument, are you saying that possibly the best course of action to convince a more like, with accepting the premise, a more conservative audience would be to connect more of a neutrally emotional response? So you're going for more of an EQ rather than an IQ based on the difference?
So
that...
I can't directly speak to that, unfortunately. Like I just don't have the data, I don't have the understanding or the expertise. Maybe somebody
I'm just
better
asking
equipped.
your position.
Yeah. So my personal approach that I find has worked really well across time is when I talk to conservatives, again, largely like my family and people in my immediate vicinity that are conservatives, is I try to make things as close to their own beliefs as possible. So I don't jump, fly, woo, like straight into ACAB. I try to make it close to home.
Well, if
kind of
you're
like
a true master, you can make ACAB sound close to their own beliefs.
And that's what I do. That's what I try to do.
Yeah,
Can you give us an example of how to do that? How do you make ACAB sound close to a cultural conservative belief?
So you start off by not saying ACAB at all, for sure. And especially if it's somebody that you know, well, one, don't virtue signal yourself as a liberal. That's or a lefty in general. That's the first thing, right? The whole tribal thing. And you try to hearken experiences to negative interactions that the person you're talking to has had with police, or negative interactions that their family has had with police. So, like, for example, saying something maybe along the lines of, like, I mean, come on, like, we've all had a negative interaction with a fucking pig, right? Fucking blue ass, some shit like that, right?
Cops beat my grandmother.
So it is more of an emotional appeal.
Yeah, I would say more of a personalized.
It's just having a conversation. Like, you don't have to look at it through this lens of like IQ. Because if we accept your premise, I feel like it's going to be difficult for people that are trying to have those conversations. It's going to be difficult for them to adequately communicate with conservatives with like this foundation of condescension.
Well, I agree that even adopting that outlook on them is already going to like
I think
put
that's
them
what
on
he's
guard.
saying is that you don't.
When
wanna...
did condescension come into this?
So I think he's assuming that because put me in the camp of a liberal, I assume that I have higher IQ because I'm a liberal and they have a lower IQ because I'm a conservative. If I go into it with that knowledge, I'm going to condescend to them, which just isn't realistic, right?
I think that is realistic.
I'm saying that if you prescribe that to people as a method of rhetoric, then I think a lot of people are going to have that foundation of condescension, and they're going to communicate through that. Like what you described is just having a conversation with someone, like saying, "Hey, like there are these things that we should like probably critique. Yeah, we've like had bad like experiences with the police."
And by the way, you shouldn't avoid.
He didn't say that.
You
He didn't say that though.
You shouldn't avoid thinking that. Just because you could appear highfalutin or condescending, you shouldn't do that because you actually have no idea if you're engaging with a single individual. If he's way smarter than you, has nothing to do with if he's a conservative or not. Any given individual could be anywhere on the bell curve.
Well,
this is just being. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay,
go ahead.
we were assuming the hypothetical. That was the entire purpose of the last 10 minutes of conversation. We had all just accepted the hypothetical.
Yeah.
Let's stop entertaining this.
No, I'm fine accepting the hypothetical. That's not my objection.
No, I have a sorry, Dr. K. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, like instead of relating it to a past negative experience, that's a good one. But I'll play my hand and show you kind of how I do it when I'm, out in the field. Is essentially you strike up a conversation with them, right? You talk for a couple of minutes. You be like, what? Oh yeah, I do this for work. What do you do for work? Is there any good places to eat around here? Stuff like that. You get like the basic information down, and then you essentially at that point should have figured out what sort of moral axioms are important to them, right? What they're try and figure out what their core beliefs are, and then you essentially relate what you're trying to essentially peddle, ideologically speaking, and relate it to the axiom that they hold that's closest to what you're trying to peddle.
Wait,
So you're describing tactical empathy, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you
I want us to be a bit
figure
more
out-
charitable. Sorry, I want us to be a bit more charitable to what Nick was saying earlier, because he wasn't saying that you should go and tell a bunch of liberals that people are stupider than you, so please condescend to them. He was saying this is a good way to do it, and this is the reason. But he's not saying we should tell everyone the reason so that they do it.
Yeah. I think if you approach it from a mindset of, hey, like there's probably this huge tribalistic like political.
No, he's saying
goal
don't do
between
that.
different
He's saying
groups of
don't approach
people.
it from that mindset, but this is how you would do it. He's saying this is the method, and then because this is a debate panel, he's giving us the reasoning.
Yeah,
boil
but
it
what I'm
down.
saying is that what he's talking about, what he's describing, he does is just through tactical empathy, as somebody said. But I don't think that having the mindset of like the higher IQ, like I don't think that approaching it from that premise is like a good idea for like communication. I think it's just going to end up making people feel condescended towards, and is going to break down that communication when you could achieve a lot more.
I don't
If
think
you
that
don't
was
condescend
a
to people, they won't feel condescended. Like,
yeah,
it's just
I
a
don't
moot
think
point.
that was a preamble to his assertions there that you should talk down to people. He was just explaining that people
I'm
learn.
not saying that he was prescribing that you should condescend. I'm saying that if you are saying this to an audience, there are people that are going to get that in their minds, and then possibly subconsciously they may like approach those conversations from like I got to talk down to these dumb conservatives.
So if this is a questioning of responsible messaging, fair enough. I think that's a totally different conversation. I wasn't thinking about the responsibility of my messaging. I think the reality of the matter is that people engage in this discussion that are really interested in battling conservatives are already pretty fucking condescending anyway. Like there's been a lot of condescension on this panel just in general towards conservatives, and there is on every online discourse. Like I don't think I'm realistically gonna make anyone listening be like, wait, I'm smarter than conservative.
Right, but what I'm saying is that we shouldn't be promoting that sort of messaging. We should be trying to breach the gap so that leftist and liberal ideas can like take a better hold. And you're only going to get to that point with like what the other person described as tactical empathy. I think that's the way that you connect with them and bring them like further from that conservative extremism.
But so here's the thing.
It's the whole thing. I think we should move on.
Okay, I'll say one more thing, and then we can move the fuck on from IQ. I'm fine with it. It's not even a night anyway. Yeah, so, fuck. What was I gonna say?
Can I just say one thing? Like knowing that conservatives or thinking in a conservative way correlates to poor cognitive ability, doesn't actually give you any information if you're engaging with an individual.
Yeah, but like
he said, openness.
His assertion wasn't at the individual level.
Yeah,
it was
so
addressing
it's like
a population, not.
So how does this inform? But you seem to be saying that this informs your engagement with individuals.
Yeah, because he's saying they're less open.
Hold on,
so
let him speak.
If you're engaging with an individual of a group that has to some degree different culture than your own, because every group has a different culture to some degree, right? Does it not make sense to be in some ways sensitive to the differences of that culture from your own?
Okay, but that's a different thing. I'm talking about the specific. It's not a.
No,
it's
because
not a,
I'm talking
it's
about
not
you
a. It's not
engaging
a
with
cultural.
an individual from a group, which in this case is a conservative, which is a group that has a cultural difference from you. That is informed
I'm not
by
talking about a cultural difference. I'm talking about the study that you cited that said that conservatism is negatively correlated with cognitive ability. Now, what I'm saying is, knowing that doesn't actually benefit you in any way if you're engaging with any given individual. There's no way to tell that any given conservative would have a higher or lower cognitive ability than you do.
Okay,
so his prescription for how to deal with that situation.
Let him respond, please.
Yeah.
Stop. Let him respond.
So it is literally a cultural difference, right? So I'll give you an example, right? If you were dealing with somebody from a super traditional country, right, you would probably adopt a somewhat more traditional approach to what you were doing, right? So like say you were going to like an embassy in a country where female bodily expression is not super warranted. You're not going to walk in wearing a crop top, right?
You're not. This is I don't know why you're moving the goalposts to cultural sensitivity when I'm
Well,
talking
I'm
specifically
making a-
about.
I'm making
No,
a
no, no.
comparison.
I'm talking specifically about cognitive ability. The study that you cited said that conservative thinking is negatively correlated to cognitive ability. So I'm
Okay.
telling you, it doesn't make any sense to go into any conversation thinking, okay, I'm going to be dealing with someone with a lower cognitive ability here because he's a conservative, because that study doesn't tell you anything about any given individual. Any given individual could be placed much higher on cognitive ability than you could score. Okay, so what I'm saying is, what relevance is this study if you're engaging any random individual?
One
Okay,
last
so
try,
do you-
then please no more.
Okay, so I'll ask you this: do you unironically
Oh, boy.
think that a factor that is held by a certain group has no impact generally on the individuals in the group? Of course, there are outliers, right? But there is a general prescription of the group. That's why it is a group.
That doesn't answer my challenge, but I'm going to let it go before we.
Are you
before
dumb?
I get kicked off the panel? What the fuck, dude? You totally skirted my point probably 3 times now, and
Okay,
I'm
Prime,
letting
can I
it
have
go.
one more
I'm letting
go?
it go.
I'll answer him as
I'm letting it
directly as
go.
I
I'm letting it
possibly
go to
can.
be polite.
Hey,
I'm letting
Iram,
it
you
go to
might be a
polite.
conservative. You seem to be having low IQ.
I mean, I'm conservative, so I guess I'm as dumb as they come, man. Okay, so you asked me, how does that give me the ability to interact with people on an individual level? Is that basically it, because their cognitive ability?
No, and in fact, this will be helpful, because if you can't restate my challenge in, not to say that you agree with it, but in the best possible terms, then you're the problem.
Okay, do you
So
guys think
please-
I massively mischaracterized what he's been asking me over and over again?
I think you slightly are.
Okay, slightly. Fair enough. That's reasonable. Do you guys think I'm massively mischaracterizing it, not getting it at all?
I think I can get to what he was asking you to reiterate that you tried to answer earlier.
Okay.
Was how does that inform the way that you engage person to person when you're engaging with a conservative? And you said that you would appeal to them so that you're make them draw comparisons between personal experiences with the police, right, that were negative, so that you could open the conversation.
No,
because you wanted
sorry.
appeal
No,
to
this is
more
not.
an
This is
emotional
not help.
aspect.
I'm sorry.
So I
this
guess
is not helpful.
nobody's getting what you're saying. I guess it's all of our problem.
Okay, I'm gonna talk really slow.
All right, that might
Because
work.
I'm talking to a conservative.
so-
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
precisely.
but I'm too. Yeah,
Yeah.
Rimshot. You linked a study that
Hmm.
said that conservatism is negatively correlated with cognitive ability,
Which is
and
G in the study. Yeah.
Great. Let's say the study is 100% accurate, and you say you keep this in mind when you talk to conservatives.
Yes.
So when you're, in other words, engaging with the conservative on an individual level. So like, oh, I'm going to talk to this conservative now. I wonder what I should say next.
Okay.
Now, what I'm telling you is that knowing that there tends to be a negative correlation between conservatism and cognitive ability doesn't tell you anything about any given individual. So to go into a conversation thinking this is a conservative, he's probably negatively correlated to cognitive ability is actually fallacious. There is no evidence of that.
Okay, so what it does for me is I assume, until it seems to be the case seems to be otherwise, that because this person has lower G, which is cognitive ability in this study, I am going to appeal more to personal anecdotes.
Okay,
and rather than
fallacy.
quote unquote like facts and logic.
I don't care anymore.
That's the fallacy, but
I don't
I just don't understand how you're not getting it. It just
It's
doesn't.
just like
I cannot fathom
unbelievable.
it.
Stop talking. Please. Yeah, we got new people here. You guys want to say something? Just Brento, Doobie.
What up, Doobie?
Hello, sir. Doobie has something.
Hey.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, I clicked away. So it's super interesting that this is being brought up, because I feel like this is actually like a massive self-report, because they've done like many studies on this, not just the one, right? And the one that I find the most interesting is the one that they did in 2014, where they found that actually people who voted Republican tended to have slightly higher verbal intelligence.
Okay.
By 2 to 5 IQ points. And that people who were like classically liberal, quote unquote, right? So not liberal in the way that you guys are thinking, not like Democrats, like
Left-wing.
classical liberals.
Oh,
No,
okay.
classical liberals, somewhat libertarian types, right? Is what we consider them today.
Laissez-faire.
Yeah, they actually tended to be to have higher IQs like overall than people who voted like Democrat or like left leaning, right? And the lower IQ people, right, the ones that were popping up in the studies were actually social conservatives, right? Like the type that would be like against gay marriage and shit like that, right? So I think it's a pretty massive self-report that you brought this up and that you're attempting to use this to say that, oh, well, conservatives, and the IQ difference is like 2 points, 2 to 5 points. It's not very much, especially when you consider what the average IQ of an American is. It's not you guys, right? The average American isn't a nerd who spends all day looking at philosophy and arguing with people on Twitch panels. Right. They have if you look at the average
they're
IQ
a
in the
lower
United
class
States,
of being. They're a lower class of being.
if you look at the average IQ in the United States, it's not you guys. Okay, that's just reality. Right? So to pretend that you need to like change your language or some way to account for that two IQ difference that you might encounter in dealing with the social conservative, it's just really silly, and it does come off as condescending.
It's
like, I don't know how you can speak
ecological.
past the fucking gas of your own farts in there. Like it's
Yes,
really
it is.
bad.
It's entirely condescending. And I just sent you a link, Nicotine, to what's called the ecological fallacy, which is what I was trying to say. Well, you can read up on that on your own.
Didn't you say that profiling was really effective when the police did it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
The
This is just
behavioral profiling is what he said was effective, not profiling based on visible group membership.
No, he said racial profiling, not behavioral.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Somebody else said behavioral profiling.
I was talking about behavioral profiling. He said racial profiling. I literally
I never said racial profiling.
You
But nice try.
did. You unironically did.
Okay.
Hey guys, I gotta bow out for the night. I gotta bow out for the night. I got a kid to take to school in the morning, but it was a pleasure.
Have a good night, man.
Yep.
Good night.
Bon voyage.
Have a good one.
All right. That was fun. Apparently my stream was messing up a little bit. I don't know if that's the case or not. We'll have to take a look. Let's see. Hopefully the video took all right. And I can repost it if it was too bad. But yeah. We'll be jumping on again. Hopefully Wednesday night if I have time. If not, I might not be able to get in there early enough before I have to go DJ. So we'll see. My hair's crazy right now. All right, guys. Have a good night. Good night. Hey, message me here in a bit, Harley. Talk to you soon.